The WorkfloPlus Editor is where you start your digital transformation journey. This is where you take your current processes and rebuild them into seamless digital processes for users to access on mobile or wearable devices. If you haven't yet downloaded the editor, check out our Installing the Editor video for details on how to do this. During this session, we're going to give you an overview of the editor and its functionality. As you launch the editor, you'll see it's made up of 4 panels. The main body panel in the centre is where you'll create your workflow. The toolbox to the left-hand side is where you'll find all of the steps to pull into your workflow as you start to create and design it. On the right-hand side, we have our properties. This contains all the tabs for defining workflows and step properties, such as tags, workflow names, and workflow IDs. These are defined per step, and we'll cover these in more detail when we start to create our workflow in our next video. Underneath properties, you have resources. This is where you can upload and attach assets to be used in your workflow, such as images, PDFs and videos, and also hyperlinks. And finally, at the bottom of the editor, you'll see errors and warnings. Whilst building your workflow, you can check for validation throughout to ensure it runs smoothly on a device before publishing. We recommend that you do this frequently to ensure that there are no surprises at the end and any issues can be found and resolved quickly. More often than not, the main issue and the most common issue is an unconnected step. But by alerting you throughout, it will keep you on track all the way through your build. To validate your workflow throughout, go to the top bar and you'll see a spreadsheet with a tick across it. Select this when you're inside your workflow and it will automatically validate. So let's take a look at an example workflow that I've worked on previously. This workflow already contains all of the steps required for a workflow. You can add all of them, or you could add just a number of instruction steps. It really is up to you how you create your workflow. So let's take a look at the steps in more detail. First of all, we have instruction step. If I wanted to pull an instruction step in from the toolbox, all I do is select it and pull it into the main body. I already have a instruction step in here, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to delete this step. The instruction step gives users the detailed information about how a job or workflow should be carried out or operated. It can also give the user information in the form of an asset, which could be something like company guidance, PDF, images, videos, or hyperlinks. The user is not expected to complete anything as part of this step. It's purely informational and as guidance. Within this step, you can also add further alerts. So if you want to enforce a message as part of an instruction step, you can add a note here that will pop up ahead of the step on the user's device to really enforce that message, like, please ensure protective clothing is worn. As mentioned previously, you can add resources into the resources bar on the right hand side, or you can add them straight into a step by clicking link or the plus button, which will open your Explorer. The next step is an input step. With an input step, the user is tasked to enter information. So here we're really asking the user to enter something as part of the step. And that can be something such as audio, barcode, photo, selection, a signature sign-off, for instance. When we open up our step and we select from the drop-down as to which type of input step we want it to be, if we were to select text, which is done so by default as part of the editor template, what we're doing here is we're asking the user to enter something. So it's likely that as part of a text input step, we'll ask the user a question and we'll ask them to type in an answer. If we were to select something like selection, we would then define the choices that we want that user to choose from. So it may be a yes or a no, or it might be 1, 2, 3, and 4. The opportunities and the possibilities here are endless. It's free type, so you can add in as many selections as you like, and they can say what you want them to say. So as part of this step, the user for instance, on their device will see the option of 1, 2, 3 or 4, and they'll be able to choose from one of those to move forward within the workflow. So again, with an input step, we're really asking the user to enter something defined by this step. The next step we're going to look at is a decision step. So this enables the user to go down one or two or more paths depending on their answer. For example, you may want the workflow to terminate or request additional information if the user selects no to a question, such as, is this safe to continue? Or you may want them to continue on the original path if they answer yes to that question. So within the decision step, you're asking the user to select something. You're asking them to define the next path. So you'd add your information in here, and again, you can add a note in here to enforce the message and assets. Outside of that step is where you will add your selections. So again, on a user's device, this will look a lot like a selection step in that they'll have the options to choose from, either yes or no. The difference here is that it would take the user down a different path dependent on how they answer. So if the user asks yes here, we're going to move that user through to an instruction step. And that might be go on to the next step. Again, it's guidance. If the answer is no, we might ask the user to add more information before finishing this group. That leads us quite nicely onto the next step, which is groups. So group steps are a way of managing larger workflows by compartmentalising them into smaller sections. This is particularly useful if you are working on a large workflow, as you can bundle a number of steps into a group to make it more manageable. Which is exactly what I've done here with my decision step. I know that I have a decision step that has multiple branches coming off it, which go to different steps depending on their answer. I could have that in the top level of the workflow here, or I could neatly bundle it into a group. For the user, this doesn't look any different. The user will go from the input step straight into the input step example here within the group, into the decision, and then defined by their path to their next step, and then it will close the group and go straight into the next step, which in this case is a terminator, and that terminates the workflow. There are other reasons that you can use a group. So if I pull another group step into my main body, and I open this up here. The other thing I can do with group steps is called form view. By selecting form view on the right hand side, all of the steps that I add into this group will then appear on one screen of the user's device, like a form. It's useful when you don't need to track the amount of time a single step took to complete, as form view will only track the time the group step took to complete and not the individual steps within it. Within a step, you have to follow the same process as you do previously. You have to have a start step and a finish step. Similar to the way in which a workflow flows, it needs to know where to start and it needs to know where to end. It's exactly the same with the group. So really what we're doing here is we're building a mini workflow within a workflow, slightly Inception-like. We need to do it in the same way as we would do in an overarching workflow. We need to connect the steps. We also need to give those steps names and complete the information within them. If I were to go outside of my group now, and I were to validate, I'll get errors within that group. There's multiple reasons I'll get errors in this group at this point. A, it's not connected to the main workflow, and B, my steps don't have any titles. So if I go ahead and I add some text in here, you'll want to add more information. And it also identifies that I have a decision step here, but I don't have multiple branches coming off my decision step. So for ease of purpose, to show how this works, I'm going to remove that decision step and I'm going to revalidate. It's still showing an error because this group is not connected to the main workflow. So if I remove this connector here by selecting the connector and then delete that, and make some space for my group, I can add that into the main body of the workflow, and again I can connect it just by selecting those connectors. I'll go to the top again and I'll validate the workflow, and all of the errors are removed. So all of the steps within the workflow are now connected, they all have titles, and on the user's device, this should run seamlessly. Going back to the groups again, we know that if we select Form View as part of a group, all of the steps within this group will appear on the same screen in the view of a form. The other way that you can use groups is loop mode. So in addition to Form View, you can select loop mode, again in the properties on the right hand side. This allows the user to complete the group multiple times, so looping around those questions. So again, to enable it, both Form View and loop mode must be selected in the properties. Another thing worth mentioning here is Form View is not available for the HMT, mainly because of the size of the screen and the amount of information you can see at any time. So I can deselect both of those, and I can come out into the main body of my workflow, which is now validated. So I can now get ready to export this or publish it live to the server. So if I go to the top here and I select File, I can export my workflow to a zip file. If I wanted a paper version of this for any reason, I can also export it to a PDF, although I can't do anything with this in the admin dashboard when we go to manage our workflow. So here I can select Export to Zip, which will download the workflow zip file into my Explorer, and then I can take that and I can manually upload that into my admin dashboard. The other option I have to publish my workflow is live to the server from here. So at the top here we can see looks like a little globe with an arrow going around it. If I select this, I can then begin to publish my workflow live straight to my admin dashboard. So that's a super quick whistle-stop tour of using the toolbox and creating a very, very basic workflow to show you how those toolbox, or all of the tools within the toolbox work, and how we can pull in the steps and what the steps mean and how you can use them. We'll go on to create a workflow from start to finish in a next video. Please take a look at that for further information. In our next video, we'll create a workflow from start to finish. Please join us for that.